Howdy SMITE fans, it's JMac. Week number 3 of the SPL is all wrapped up. We had a couple of in-studio matchups and a couple of unexpected twists. Let's take a walk down memory lane to see what all happened in this week's SPL Weekly Recap. We start off our weekend with the Tartarus Titans against the Valhalla Valkyries for our first set. I'll keep this one brief. The Titans simply dominated the Valks. This double assassin comp got an early lead and just frankly snowballed out of control. Layers in particular ending the set in a 16-2-14 slash line. Tartarus Titans take the set 2-0 in clean fashion. Our second set of Friday was between the Olympus Bolts and the Camelot Kings. Now, game number 1, the Kings were able to push an early lead. The Bolts didn't even really look like they were trying all that hard to fight back. The Kings were ready to start taking the Phoenix sieges, but one tiny misplay, one lone minion 34 thwarts Variety and the Camelot Kings' plans. His blink gets interrupted, the ult goes to the wayside, and the Bolts win the team fight and take game number 1. Game number 2, simply put, was just a bloodbath between Lasbra and Captain Twig. The Kings held the early game, but Lasbra, he wasn't having none of that. The last 15 minutes of that game was just a jungler 1v1, and that one went Lasbra and the Bolts' way. The skirmishes were just enough for the Bolts to take the edge they need and take the set 2-0. Our match of the week, the one that you're not going to want to miss, took place between the Olympus Bolts and the Atlantis Leviathans, and it kicked off our Saturday. The Bolts are continuing to try and iron out this give up the early, win the late game strategy they had against the Kings. The 23 minutes of Leviathan's control is halted in its tracks with just one team fight around the Fire Giant. Parkour heavily commits to a kill against Benenu, and he got that kill. But Jake and Haddix are able to tag team ult the carries. Lasbra cleans up the fight, and that 10k lead the Leviathans had crumbles before their very eyes. The Bolts steal away game 1. And you would think the momentum the Bolts had from game number 1 would push into game 2, but then you'd be wrong. Panaton pulls off yet another level 5 gank in dual lane, wiping out the entirety of the Bolts duo. Small 2-for-1 and 2-for-2 trades litter the game, but none of them benefit the Bolts. Leviathans bait a Fire Giant fight and roll right over the Bolts, tying the set 1-1. In game number 3, Lasbra decides it's his turn to try and storm the duo lane. And with it, he's able to get a quick early double kill for Barracuda. The lead tilts back and forth for about 15 minutes, and then Zatman activated. Barra attempts a 1v1, and he learns the hard way just how hard Ullr can hit. Couple that with a triple kill the very next team fight at the Gold Fury, and Zatman completely shuts down the Bolts. Leviathans take game 3 and hold on to their undefeated Phase 3 run. And our next set of the day was another in-studio matchup and a heated rivalry between the Jade Dragons and the Solar Scarabs. The Dragons took no time controlling game number 1. Sam Susano coupled with Final K Zhang Kui completely dominates the early game, and they leave it up to Panda Cat to go ahead and round out the later stage of the game. Game number 1 goes to the Dragons. Game 2, less than a minute in, SOT gets a solo kill on Final K, and Scream and Baronic decimate Sam in the mid 2v2. The Scarabs are able to maintain the lead and scoop a fight around the Fire Giant, with Scream leading the charge on his Bakasura. Game number 2 goes for the Scarabs. Game number 3 is all about the side lanes of the Dragons. Final K and Panda Cat lead the team to victory with their strong defenses around objectives and their abilities to absolutely one-shot anyone who dare walk in their way. Jade Dragons take the set 2-1. The beginning of the end of our weekend kicks off with the Solar Scarabs against the Valhalla Valkyries. Game 1 is an explosive start from the Valkyries solo side. Johnny and Ducky find multiple picks early game against the Scarabs and drive the entirety of the early game. And it's Zeros on Chang'e who slams the final nail in the coffin with a massive 3-man waxing moon to take game number 1, push the Scarabs on the back foot. And the Scarabs? Well, they took that one personal. Game number 2, it's their right side who decide to pop off. Scream and SOT remove any and all beads from the equation, and then subsequently remove any and all Valkyries from the battleground. Scarabs nearly sweep the Valkyries in game number 2 and tie up the set. And game number 3, It's the Valks who come out the gate swinging. They get up 10 kills without a single answer back, nearly 8,000 gold in their favor, and then they risk it all for one fire giant. They lose that coin toss. The Scarabs turn the game in a full 180, and the last line of defense crumbles for the Valkyries. And with no fight back, they drop game number 3, and the Scarabs could finally prevail with their first win of the phase in a 2-1 set. To close out our weekend, we end with the Camelot Kings and the Oni Warriors. Game number 1 is a back-and-forth battle of the ages. The Kings, they maintain an early gold lead and maintain that lead throughout the majority of the game. Things were starting to look bleak for the Warriors. Despite winning the late-game team fights, they pull a risky fire giant, and they end up losing the trade. It's the Kings who sweep the objective and take game number 1. The second verse? Same as the first, except the shoe is on the other foot this time, and it's the Warriors holding the lead. The Kings win a massive fight late game, and they decide it's their turn to pull the fire giant. But little did they know that Vote was sneaking right up behind them. He takes the objective, and then at the mid lane Phoenix fight, it's Dardes who takes the team fight with a big triple. But in the end, it's Captain Twig on the left Phoenix defense at the Kings base who slams home a double kill and shoves the Warriors back to base and sends them home packing. The Kings take the set 2-0. And there you have it. The Atlantis Leviathans still remain undefeated through week number 3 of play with a 4-0 record. They got 4 teams hot on their heels, but are any of them going to be able to dethrone the Leviathans? We'll have to find out in week number 4 of the SPL. If you miss out on any of the action, don't worry, I'll always have you covered on the SPL Weekly Recap.